The words hung in the quiet, sterile air of their minimalist living room, each one a perfectly polished stone dropped into a still pond. "We owe $200,000 in taxes," Liam said, his voice even, almost conversational. He watched his wife, Chloe, not for a reaction of support or concern, but with the dispassionate curiosity of a scientist observing a predictable chemical reaction. He had designed this experiment with meticulous care, and this was the moment of truth. Chloe's posture, which had been one of languid, elegant boredom as she scrolled through her phone, went rigid. Her head snapped up, the soft, curated light of the screen illuminating a face that was a perfect sculpture of disbelief and fury. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. The first question that should have formed, a question of partnership, of shared burden, of simple human empathy like, "Are you okay?" or "How did this happen?" never stood a chance. It was suffocated at birth by a lifetime of prioritizing appearance over substance. Instead, what emerged was a declaration, sharp and cold as a shard of glass. "I want a divorce." She said it before asking if he was okay. She said it before asking if he was in trouble. She said it before asking what they could do. In that single, reflexive sentence, 5 years of marriage were not just ended, they were revealed for what they had always been, a transaction that had just defaulted. Liam felt a profound, aching stillness settle over him. It was not the shock of heartbreak, but the quiet satisfaction of a hypothesis proven correct. He thought they had built a life. They hadn't. He had been renting space in her ambition, and the lease was now void. She was confident, utterly certain in her decision. What she didn't know was that the debt she feared was a fiction, and the man she was discarding was about to become the architect of her entire world. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for another story. I see you all filing into the comments. Hello to our friends in Texas, London, and the Philippines. It's amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you're enjoying the content and want to make sure you don't miss what happens next, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow. Now, let's get back to Liam and Chloe, because the foundation of this particular house is about to be tested, and the inspection report is not going to be pretty. 3 months before that fateful declaration, the humiliations had become a kind of background radiation in Liam's life, a constant, low-level hum of inadequacy he had learned to tune out. The setting for the most recent degradation was, as usual, the Thorne family home, a sprawling monument to new money that Chloe's father, Marcus Thorne, had built for himself. It was all gleaming marble, cavernous ceilings, and furniture that looked deeply uncomfortable, chosen for its price tag rather than its utility. Dinner was a weekly ritual of quiet suffering for Liam, and a stage for Marcus to perform his favorite role, the self-made titan of industry. "The problem with your generation, Liam," Marcus began, swirling a Bordeaux in his glass that cost more than Liam's feigned weekly salary, "is a fundamental lack of hunger." He didn't look at Liam when he spoke, instead addressing the crystal chandelier as if it were a board of directors. "You're all content. You want work-life balance. You want to be draftsmen. In my day, we wanted to be kings. We clawed our way up, brick by bloody brick." Liam took a slow, deliberate sip of water. He could feel the eyes of Chloe's mother, Eleanor, on him, a gaze that managed to be both pitying and accusatory. Chloe, seated beside him, shifted in her chair, the subtle rustle of her silk dress a sigh of pure exasperation. She wished he would just say something, anything, to defend himself, to show a spark of the ambition her father worshipped. But Liam remained silent, his face a placid mask. "It's not about contentment, Marcus," Liam said finally, his voice calm and measured. "It's about building something that lasts, something with integrity." Marcus let out a short, barking laugh. "Integrity? The bank doesn't accept integrity as a deposit. The world is built by closers, my boy, People who sign the deals, people who take the risks. He leaned forward, his eyes, small and hard like ball bearings, finally locking onto Liam's. Look at you, 5 years married to my daughter, and what have you got to show for it? A mid-level job at a soulless corporate firm. A respectable salary, I'm sure. Enough to be comfortable, but you're a passenger in your own life. The insult was designed to sting, and Liam knew it was for Chloe's benefit as much as his own. It was a test of her loyalty, a test she failed every Sunday. She didn't defend him. She didn't squeeze his hand under the table. She just stared at her plate, her silence a form of assent. She was embarrassed, not of her father's cruelty, but of her husband's perceived failure. Tell you what, Marcus continued, magnanimous now that he had established dominance. I've got a site manager position opening up on the new condo project. It's a step up, more responsibility, more money. It's yours if you want it. Time to get your hands dirty, be part of something real. The offer was a calculated humiliation dressed as charity. A site manager. He, Liam Sterling, whose unaccredited designs in university were already being studied as masterclasses in spatial harmony, was being offered a job overseeing concrete pours and scheduling drywall installers. It was like offering a concert pianist a job tuning pianos in a high school music room. Inside his pocket, Liam's fingers found the smooth, cool barrel of his fountain pen. It was a simple, elegant instrument, a Lamy 2000, known for its timeless design and flawless function. To Chloe and her family, it was just a pen, an odd affectation for a simple draftsman. To Liam, it was a totem. He had bought it with the first check from the sale of his proprietary design software, a seven-figure sum that now formed the seed capital for his own firm. A firm so successful and so discreet that Marcus Thorne had no idea he was already one of its unwitting clients through a series of shell corporations. He smiled, a gentle, almost imperceptible curving of his lips. That's very generous of you, Marcus. I'll certainly give it some thought. Chloe's sigh was audible this time. He hadn't refused. He hadn't accepted. He had done what he always did. He had been placid, reasonable, and utterly, infuriatingly passive. As they drove home later in their modest, sensible sedan, a car Liam chose specifically for its lack of ostentation, the silence in the car was thick with her disappointment. "Why do you let him talk to you like that?" she finally burst out, her voice tight with a frustration that had been simmering all evening. "He's your father, Chloe. He's just trying to help in his own way." "Help?" she scoffed. "He was humiliating you, and you just sat there and took it. I'll give it some thought. You sounded like a child being offered a larger allowance. Why couldn't you just tell him you have your own path, that you're happy?" But that was the problem, wasn't it? He wasn't allowed to be happy with his current station. His contentment was a personal affront to her ambitions. Because telling him I'm happy would have been a lie, Liam thought, the words a silent echo in his mind. He wasn't happy. He was waiting. "He offered you a real opportunity," she pressed on, her voice rising. "A chance to be part of his world, to build something, and you just smiled." "It's not my world, Chloe." "But it could be. Don't you want more? For us?" "For me," her tone implied. "Don't you want more for me to show off?" Liam turned his gaze from the road to look at her. In the fleeting glow of the streetlights, he saw the beautiful woman he had fallen in love with, the one who had laughed at his jokes and claimed to admire his quiet intensity. He had believed, perhaps naively, that she saw the strength beneath the stillness. But he saw now that she had only ever seen a block of uncarved marble, and she was growing impatient with her inability to chisel it into a shape that pleased her. He had deliberately built a life of perceived modesty to test the foundations of their love. He wanted to be loved for the man he was, not the man he could become or the balance in his bank account. He was beginning to suspect that the foundations were nothing but sand. The weekly dinners at the Thorne mansion were no longer just family obligations. They were stress tests, and the cracks were beginning to show everywhere. The drive home continued in a heavy, resentful silence. When they arrived at their tastefully decorated but decidedly middle-class home, another choice Liam had made to maintain his cover, the tension followed them through the door. Chloe immediately retreated to the bedroom, the sharp click of the closing door a punctuation mark on her displeasure. Liam stood alone in the living room, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound. He walked over to his drafting table, a beautiful old wooden piece he had restored himself. It was the one indulgence he had allowed himself in their shared space. On it, under a sheet of protective vellum, lay the preliminary sketches for his latest project. Not the mundane corporate schematics he brought home as a decoy, but the real work. It was a design for a new city library, a breathtaking structure of glass and reclaimed timber that seemed to float above a man-made lake. It was ambitious, innovative, and deeply soulful. It was everything he was, hidden in plain sight. He ran his hand over the vellum, the paper cool and smooth beneath his touch. He had started his own firm, Keystone Architectural, 3 years ago, under a different name, channeling his prodigious talent into a venture that was now quietly reshaping the skylines of 3 different cities. He had a small, elite team, a roster of high-profile international clients, and a net worth that would make Marcus Thorne's blood pressure spike. He had kept it all a secret from Chloe. It had started as a romantic idea, a test, to see if she could love the man, not the portfolio, to build a life on a foundation of genuine affection before revealing the gilded framework that could support it. He had imagined a day when he would sit her down, spread the real blueprints of his life before her, and they would laugh together at the grand, elaborate ruse. He would tell her that the sensible sedan could be replaced by any car she desired, that their modest house could be a key to any home she could dream of. He imagined her surprise turning to joy, her love deepening with the realization that he had done it all for them. But the dream had soured. Her impatience had curdled into disdain. Her encouragement had become criticism. The test was no longer about confirming her love. It was now about measuring its absence. Each dismissive comment from her father, each sigh of her own, was another piece of data. He was an architect, after all. He dealt in structure, in stress loads, in foundational integrity. And the data was showing, with terrifying clarity, that the structure of his marriage was unsound. It was built on a faulty premise, her assumption of his mediocrity and her belief that she could fix it. He picked up the Lamy 2000 from the table. The pen felt solid, balanced in his hand. It had signed contracts worth tens of millions of dollars. It had sketch designs that had won prestigious awards his wife had never heard of. It was a symbol of his secret world, a world where he was not a passenger, but the captain, the navigator, and the chief engineer. Chloe's words echoed in his mind. "Don't you want more?" Oh, he wanted more, but he was beginning to understand that the more he wanted had nothing to do with money or status. He wanted a partner who would stand with him, not behind him, tapping her foot impatiently. He wanted a love that was a load-bearing wall, not a decorative facade. He had designed the perfect test, an emotional stress test to see if their bond could hold. And with each passing day, with each fresh humiliation, he felt the first terrible tremors of its collapse. The evening's conversation with Marcus wasn't just another unpleasant dinner. It was a clear data point indicating catastrophic failure was imminent. Liam knew he would have to make a decision soon. An architect cannot, in good conscience, allow people to live in a building he knows is about to fall down. The following week saw the pressure escalate, the cracks in their marriage widening into fissures. The incident at the annual hospital charity gala was a particular masterpiece of public humiliation. It was the kind of event Chloe lived for, a glittering spectacle of the city's elite, where status was worn as visibly as couture. Liam hated them. He saw them as trading floors for egos, but he went for her, playing the part of the dutiful, slightly out of his depth husband. He stood by the bar, nursing a club soda, a quiet island in a sea of champagne flutes and booming laughter. He wore a well-tailored but unremarkable tuxedo, another piece of his carefully constructed camouflage. Chloe, however, was in her element. She wore a shimmering, backless gown of silver silk that drew eyes from every corner of the room. She moved through the crowd with the predatory grace of a shark, leaving Liam in her wake. He watched her from a distance, a practice he had perfected over the years. She was talking to a small, powerful-looking group that included Alistair Finch, a rival developer known for his flashy projects and even flashier personal life. Marcus Thorne loathed him, which of course made him irresistible to Chloe. She was laughing, her head tilted back, her hand resting for a moment too long on Alistair's arm. Liam felt nothing. Not jealousy, not anger, just a cold, analytical detachment. He was observing a subject in its natural habitat. Later, he was cornered by one of Chloe's friends, a woman named Tiffany whose face was a testament to the miracles of modern chemistry. "Liam, darling," she cooed, her voice thin and brittle. "It's so good to see you. Chloe was just telling us how steady you are." Steady. The word was a beautifully polished insult. It meant boring. It meant safe. It meant he was the drab gray backdrop against which Chloe's vibrant colors could pop. "I do my best," Liam replied with his usual placid smile. "Chloe is such a firecracker," Tiffany continued, oblivious. "We were all so surprised when she settled for, well, you know, a quiet life. But she says you keep her grounded." Grounded, like an anchor, something that stops a magnificent ship from sailing to more exciting ports. Liam just nodded, the smile never leaving his face. He could see Chloe across the room, now deep in conversation with Alistair. She glanced over at Liam, her expression a fleeting mix of guilt and defiance, before turning back to her new, more interesting companion. In that moment, he wasn't her husband, he was her alibi. Her proof that despite her flirting, she was a respectable, married woman. The unexpected ally appeared in the form of an older gentleman Liam recognized instantly. Julian Sterling, a reclusive but legendary investor from Zurich, known for his Midas touch and his utter disdain for public spectacle. He was Marcus Thorne's white whale, the one investor Marcus had been trying to land for his waterfront development project for over a year. Sterling was rumored to be in town, but no one had actually seen him. Yet here he was, standing near a potted ficus, looking just as bored as Liam felt. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Sterling's face, a roadmap of shrewd intelligence, broke into a subtle, almost imperceptible smile. He gave Liam a slow, deliberate nod. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, of shared secrets. Sterling was the primary backer of Keystone Architectural. He knew exactly who Liam was and what he was worth. He knew the steady draftsman in the off-the-rack tux was the most powerful man in the room, holding the futures of half the people there, including Marcus Thorne and Alistair Finch, in the palm of his hand. Liam returned the nod, a silent confirmation. The game was afoot. Sterling's presence here was no accident. It was a move on the chessboard, orchestrated by Liam himself, a piece being positioned for the checkmate to come. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of fake smiles and empty conversations. When Chloe finally rejoined him near the end of the night, she was flushed with excitement. "Alistair Finch is incredible," she gushed, her eyes bright. "He's breaking ground on the new Helios Tower. He said he might have a place for someone with your skills. A real design-forward project. I gave him your number." She had offered him up like a party favor. She hadn't asked. She had just seen an opportunity to elevate her own status by associating her husband, however tangentially, with a man like Finch. "That was thoughtful of you," Liam said, his voice betraying no emotion. "Well, you never seem to make these connections for yourself," she said, the compliment quickly souring into a familiar critique. "You have to put yourself out there, Liam. No one is going to hand you success." The irony was so thick he could have choked on it. He, who had just shared a silent acknowledgement with the man who could buy and sell Alistair Finch before breakfast, was being lectured on networking. He let the comment hang in the air, another piece of evidence for the file. The drive home was a repeat of the post-dinner debrief, only this time her frustration was laced with the heady excitement of her social triumph. She talked incessantly about Alistair, about the people she had met, about the world she so desperately wanted to inhabit fully. Liam was not a participant in the conversation, he was merely the driver. Back at their house, Liam went to his drafting table. He took out the Lamy 2000 and a fresh sheet of paper. He didn't draw buildings. He began to draw a flowchart. It started in a box at the top labeled The Marriage. From it, two arrows branched out. One was labeled Salvageable, the other Demolition. Under Demolition, he began to list, with the cool, dispassionate precision of an architect planning a controlled implosion, the steps that would need to be taken. He was designing the end. The gala had not been a social event. It had been a site survey, and he had confirmed the ground was unstable, the structure compromised beyond repair. The presence of Julian Sterling had been his own private signal that the time for observation was nearly over. The time for action was approaching. The quiet, steady draftsman was about to reveal the blueprints for a whole new world. The final, definitive piece of data arrived on their 5th wedding anniversary. This was not an act of spontaneous humiliation by Chloe or her family. It was a deliberate test, designed and executed by Liam himself. He needed one last, irrefutable proof point before he initiated the sequence he had mapped out on his flowchart. He needed to know, beyond any shadow of a doubt, if there was anything left to salvage. He purchased a gift for Chloe. It was a necklace, a single, perfect sapphire on a delicate white gold chain. It was not ostentatious. It was not a brand she could name drop at a cocktail party. It was elegant, timeless, and deeply personal. The sapphire matched the exact shade of her eyes in the moment he had first told her he loved her, a detail he was certain she had forgotten. The piece was from a small, independent jeweler whose work he admired, a true artist. It was also expensive, prohibitively so for a man on a draftsman's salary, but a comfortable purchase for the owner of Keystone Architectural. It cost just over $10,000. He knew their joint account, the one she monitored like a hawk, could not sustain such a purchase. This was part of the test. He presented it to her over a quiet dinner at home, which he had cooked himself. He watched her face as she opened the small, velvet box. He saw the initial flicker of genuine delight. The necklace was undeniably beautiful, but it was immediately extinguished by a second, more powerful emotion: suspicion. "Liam," she said, her voice carefully neutral, "this is beautiful, but where did it come from?" The question itself was an indictment, not thank you, not an expression of love, but an interrogation, an audit. "It's your anniversary gift, Chloe," he said softly. "I know, but we can't afford this." She looked from the necklace to him, her eyes narrowed. "How did you pay for it? Did you put it on a credit card?" "Liam, we've talked about this. We need to be saving, not splurging on things we don't need." The lecture was perfectly rehearsed, the same one she gave him whenever he suggested a weekend trip or a minor upgrade to their home. It was the doctrine of her father. Wealth is for display, and since they had none, they must live in a state of perpetual, joyless austerity. "I wanted to get you something special," he said, keeping his voice even. "For 5 years." "Special doesn't have to be expensive," she countered, closing the box with a decisive snap. The sound echoed in the quiet room. "This is irresponsible. I'm going to have to take it back." Liam felt the last flicker of hope die within him. He had given her a symbol of his love, and she had seen only a liability on a balance sheet. She hadn't even tried it on. She hadn't held it against her skin or looked in a mirror. She had assessed its value not by its beauty or the sentiment behind it, but by its perceived impact on their finances. Finances she believed were precarious. "Please don't," he said, a final quiet plea. "It would mean a lot to me if you kept it." Her expression softened, but not with compassion. It was pity. The look one gives a well-meaning child who doesn't understand how the world works. "It's for the best, honey. We need to be practical. I'll exchange it for something more sensible." The next day she did exactly that. She returned the sapphire necklace. But she didn't put the money back into their savings account. Instead, she exchanged it, adding a substantial amount from her father's ever-present line of credit for a garish, diamond-encrusted watch from a trendy, overpriced designer. It was the kind of piece Alistair Finch's wife might wear. It was loud, branded, and utterly devoid of personality. It was a billboard for wealth, and it was perfect. She showed it to him that evening, her wrist extended, the diamonds catching the light. "See," she said, a triumphant smile on her face. "Isn't this much more impressive? It's an investment piece." Liam looked at the watch, then at her face, aglow with the thrill of her acquisition. She had taken his gesture of intimate love and traded it for a public statement of status. She hadn't just returned a gift. She had rejected the entire value system it represented. The test was complete. The results were conclusive. The arrow on his flowchart pointing toward demolition was no longer a possibility. It was an imperative. That night after she fell asleep, the new watch carefully placed on her nightstand, Liam went back to his drafting table. He put away the beautiful, hopeful design for the city library. He pulled out a fresh folder. This one was not filled with sketches of buildings, but with financial statements, legal documents, and a detailed timeline. He took out his Lamy 2000 pen, its sleek black barrel cool and solid in his hand. He unscrewed the cap and began to write, his script neat and precise. He was no longer sketching possibilities. He was finalizing the plan. He was an architect, and the first step in any new construction is the careful, methodical demolition of the condemned structure that stands in its way. The quiet before the storm had ended. The first winds were beginning to blow. The moment he had been preparing for was finally here. He would give it 1 week. 1 week for all the final pieces to move into place. Then he would present his wife with a problem she couldn't solve, just to see what she would do. He already knew the answer. The living room felt like a vacuum, all the air and warmth sucked out by the 4 words Chloe had just spoken. "I want a divorce." Liam sat on the gray linen sofa, a piece she had chosen for its aesthetic neutrality, and felt a strange sense of calm descend. The final data point had been collected. The experiment was over. He watched her as the reality of her own decision washed over her. Her face, which had been a mask of cold fury, began to crumble. Panic flickered in her eyes. It wasn't the panic of losing a loved one, but the terror of a financial catastrophe. $200,000. To her, it was an anchor that would drag them both to the bottom of the ocean, and she was severing the rope, determined to save herself. "How could you let this happen, Liam?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a rage born of fear. She began to pace the room, her movements sharp and agitated, a caged animal. 200,000? That's everything. That's more than everything. We'll be ruined. They'll take the house." "The house is a rental, Chloe," he reminded her gently, his voice a stark contrast to her hysteria. "Don't be difficult," she snapped. "They'll take our savings, my savings, everything I've worked for." Liam resisted the urge to ask what exactly she had worked for. Her part-time job as a gallery consultant, funded by her father, barely covered her wardrobe. Their joint savings account was funded almost entirely by his own, deliberately modest, salary. "I can't do this," she said, shaking her head, tears of self-pity welling in her eyes. "I can't be dragged down by your incompetence. My father warned me. He said you had no ambition, no head for the real world." She pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. I'm calling my father. He'll know what to do. He'll get me the best lawyer. And there it was. Not, let me call my father to see if he can help us, but he'll get me the best lawyer. In her mind, the battle lines were already drawn. It was her versus him. The partnership was a fiction she had discarded at the first sign of trouble. Liam simply sat and watched. He heard her side of the conversation, a frantic, tearful retelling of his supposed failure. "Daddy, it's a disaster. Liam has, I don't know, he's destroyed us. A tax bill, he says it's 200,000. Yes, I know. No, of course not. I told him. I want a divorce. I can't. I just can't." There was a pause. Liam could almost hear Marcus's voice on the other end. A mixture of "I told you so" satisfaction and cold, calculating anger. He would see this not as a family crisis, but as a hostile takeover of his daughter's future, one that needed to be ruthlessly quashed. Chloe hung up the phone, her face set with a grim new resolve. She looked at him now not as a husband, but as an obstacle, an asset to be liquidated. "My father is arranging everything," she said, her voice cold and businesslike. "His lawyer will be in touch with you tomorrow to discuss the terms of the separation. You'll need to find somewhere else to live. I'll be staying here, for now." She had it all figured out. In the space of 10 minutes, she had tried, convicted, and sentenced him, and was now overseeing the division of their non-existent spoils. "Okay," Liam said. Just that one word. His quiet compliance seemed to unnerve her more than any argument would have. She had expected him to beg, to plead, to panic. His stillness was unnatural. It was the calm at the center of a hurricane she couldn't see. "Okay, that's all you have to say?" she demanded. "You've made your decision, Chloe," he replied, his gaze steady. "There doesn't seem to be much left to discuss right now." He stood up, his movements fluid and unhurried. He walked past her, toward the small study where he kept his drafting table. He could feel her eyes on his back, a mixture of contempt and confusion. "Where are you going?" "I have some work to do," he said without turning around. He closed the study door behind him, the soft click sealing him off from the wreckage in the living room. He sat down at his table, the familiar comfort of the worn wood a grounding force. He looked at the flowchart he had drawn. The path was now clear. Every box had been ticked, every condition met. He pulled out his phone, but he didn't call a lawyer. He didn't call a friend for support. He sent a single, 3-word text message to a number saved under the name JS. "Initiate the acquisition." A reply came back almost instantly. "A pleasure. The board is convened for 9 a.m. Monday. Your presence is requested." Liam then sent another text, this one to Marcus Thorne's personal assistant, a woman he knew was fiercely loyal and efficient. "Please inform Mr. Thorne that Liam Sterling requests a meeting with him and his daughter Chloe Thorne at the Thorne Development offices on Monday at 9 a.m. to discuss a matter of significant financial urgency concerning the waterfront project. Inform him that his legal counsel should be present." He used his full name. Liam Sterling. Not Liam, Chloe's husband. Not Liam, the draftsman. Liam Sterling. A name Marcus Thorne would not recognize, but the mention of the waterfront project, his obsession, would ensure the meeting took place. The trap was set. He leaned back in his chair, the faint scent of paper and ink filling the air. He felt a profound sadness, a deep, resonant grief for the marriage he had hoped to build. He had wanted a partner to share his secret world with, and instead, he had found a trespasser who only valued the property for its market price. But beneath the sadness, there was something else, a hard, clear sense of purpose. He was an architect. He had designed a beautiful life, but it had been built on a lie. Not his lie about his wealth, but her lie about her love. Now it was time to clear the site and build something new. Something with integrity, something that would last. The demolition would be loud, and it would be messy, but it was necessary. And it would begin Monday morning at 9 o'clock sharp. The Thorn Development boardroom was exactly as Liam had imagined it, a sterile cathedral of corporate power. A single monolithic slab of polished granite served as the table, surrounded by 20 leather chairs that looked like minimalist thrones. One entire wall was a sheet of glass, offering a panoramic, godlike view of the city below. It was a room designed to intimidate, to remind any visitor of Marcus Thorne's dominance over the skyline. Liam arrived at precisely 8:55 a.m. He was not escorted up as a visitor. He arrived with Julian Sterling, whose presence caused a ripple of quiet panic among the executive assistants in the lobby. They were waved through security without a word. When they entered the boardroom, the Thorne contingent was already assembled. Marcus sat at the head of the table, flanked by his lawyer, a grim-faced man named Abernathy. Chloe sat 2 chairs down, her face a mask of pale, nervous resolve. She looked at Liam, her expression hardening with contempt. She saw his simple, dark gray suit and his calm demeanor as further evidence of his pathetic lack of awareness. She thought he had come to beg. "Liam," Marcus began, his voice a low growl. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "I don't know what kind of stunt you think you're pulling, mentioning the waterfront project, but you have 5 minutes to explain yourself before I have security show you out." Then his eyes fell on the man standing beside Liam. Marcus's face went slack, the arrogant certainty draining away to be replaced by utter, baffled disbelief. "Mr. Sterling, what are you doing here?" Julian Sterling, the reclusive titan of finance, smiled a thin, wintry smile. "I am here as a board member of Keystone Architectural, Mr. Thorne. At the invitation of our founder and CEO, he gestured with one elegant, age-spotted hand toward Liam. Abernathy, the lawyer, shuffled his papers, looking confused. "Keystone Architectural? I'm not familiar with that entity." Chloe let out a small, incredulous laugh. "Keystone? Liam, is this some kind of joke? What are you talking about?" Liam didn't look at her. His focus was entirely on Marcus. He walked to the empty side of the table and placed a single, thick, leather-bound portfolio on the granite surface. The sound was soft, but it landed with the weight of a gavel. "Good morning, Marcus," Liam said, his voice filling the cavernous room. It was not the quiet, deferential voice they were used to. It was the voice of a man in command. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Let's dispense with the theatrics. 2 days ago, I informed my wife of a hypothetical $200,000 tax liability." He paused, letting the word hypothetical sink in. He saw a flicker of confusion in Chloe's eyes. Her immediate response was not one of concern for our partnership, but a demand for a divorce and a call to her father to secure legal representation against me. It was, for me, a clarifying moment. It confirmed that this marriage was, and has always been, a business arrangement. So today, I've come to discuss business. He opened the portfolio. Inside were not divorce papers, but a set of architectural renderings so beautiful and complex, they look like works of art. "Keystone Architectural," Liam continued, his voice cool and precise, "is my firm. I founded it 3 years ago. We specialize in large-scale urban development with a focus on sustainable, integrated design. Our primary financial backer is Mr. Sterling and his consortium." Marcus stared, speechless. He looked from Liam to the legendary investor to the blueprints, his mind struggling to connect the three. "Over the past 18 months, Liam went on, Keystone has been systematically acquiring the land, the permits, and the political capital necessary for the city's new waterfront development." The color drained from Marcus's face. The waterfront project was his magnum opus, the legacy-defining achievement he had poured millions into pursuing. "Your bids were aggressive, Marcus, but they were predictable. You were trying to buy the land. I was busy buying the companies that own the land. You were lobbying city council members. I was co-authoring the zoning legislation they were voting on. You were playing checkers. I have been playing chess." He slid one of the renderings across the polished table. It stopped directly in front of Marcus. It was a breathtaking vision of the waterfront, a harmonious blend of public parks, residential towers that seemed to touch the clouds, and innovative commercial spaces. It was a masterpiece. And in the bottom right corner, in small, elegant script, was the title block. The Sterling Waterfront. Lead architect, Liam Sterling. Firm, Keystone Architectural. Chloe made a small, choking sound. Liam, what is this? He turned to look at her then for the first time. His gaze was not angry, not triumphant. It was cold. It was the look of a stranger. This, Chloe, is my work. This is the ambition you claimed I lacked. This is the success you couldn't see because you were too busy looking for the price tag. He then addressed Abernathy. Now about that tax bill, the $200,000 is in fact real. It's the capital gains tax owed on the sale of a small subsidiary of Keystone last month. A sale which netted, after tax, just over $2 million. It was a minor transaction, but I thought the number would be illustrative. He let that sink in. The debt that had ended his marriage was not a debt at all. It was the consequence of a profit so large it was beyond their comprehension. Thorn Development is now in a precarious position, Julian Sterling spoke up, his voice dry as dust. You are over-leveraged, and your primary strategic objective, the waterfront, is now the exclusive property of Keystone. In short, Mr. Thorn, you are on the verge of ruin. Marcus Thorn, the Titan, the king, looked small. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire empire vaporize before his eyes. However, Liam said, drawing all focus back to him, I am not an unreasonable man. Keystone is prepared to offer Thorn Development a partnership. You have the construction infrastructure we need. We have the project, the capital, and the vision. We will acquire a controlling 51% stake in your company for the symbolic price of $1. You will work for me. You will build my designs. Your company will survive. You will even get to save face publicly. Those are my terms. The room was silent save for the hum of the ventilation system. Marcus stared at Liam, his face a maelstrom of fury, humiliation, and dawning, horrified respect. Chloe stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. Liam, she whispered, her face pale. She took a step toward him, her hand outstretched. I didn't understand. Liam looked at her outstretched hand, then back at her face. He saw the calculation in her eyes, the frantic recalibration. The man she had discarded as worthless was now the most powerful man she had ever met. Her mind was racing, trying to find a way back, a way to reclaim the prize she had so carelessly thrown away. No, Liam said, his voice soft but utterly final. You understood perfectly. You made a choice based on the information you valued, and it was the wrong one. He turned back to Marcus. You have until noon to accept the offer, Marcus. After that, we will proceed with a hostile takeover, and I assure you the terms will be far less generous. He closed his portfolio, the leather cover making another soft, final sound. He gave a slight nod to Julian Sterling, and together they turned and walked out of the boardroom, leaving the ruins of the Thorn Empire scattered on the polished granite table behind them. The immediate aftermath was a study in desperation. Chloe's first attempt to reverse her catastrophic mistake came in the form of a text message, sent just minutes after Liam left the boardroom. It was a frantic, typo-riddled plea. Liam, please, we need to talk. I made a mistake. I was scared. I love you. Liam read the message as he and Julian Sterling rode the silent, express elevator down to the lobby. He felt a flicker of the old sadness, a ghost of the love he had once felt. But it was quickly replaced by a cold clarity. She didn't love him. She loved what he now represented: power, wealth, and a status so far beyond her father's that it was intoxicating. He deleted the message without replying. His phone began to ring. Chloe's name flashed on the screen. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again and again. He silenced the ringer, the persistent buzzing a frantic, desperate echo of the choice she had made. When he arrived back at the rental house later that afternoon to pack his personal belongings, he found her waiting for him. The arrogant resolve of the morning was gone, replaced by a carefully constructed mask of contrition. She had been crying, her eyes were red and puffy, but her makeup was immaculately reapplied. It was a performance. "Liam," she began, her voice a soft, trembling whisper. "Can we please just talk?" "There's nothing to talk about, Chloe," he said, walking past her into the study. He began to carefully wrap his books and drafting tools. She followed him, hovering in the doorway. "Yes, there is. I was wrong. I was a fool. I was scared, and I panicked. The money, it frightened me. But it doesn't matter. None of it matters. I love you, Liam, the real you." Liam stopped what he was doing and turned to face her. He decided to grant her this one final conversation. He owed it to the man he used to be, the one who had loved her. "The real me?" he asked, his voice devoid of accusation. It was a simple, honest question. "Which version is that, Chloe? Is it the quiet draftsman you were ashamed of? The one whose hand you wouldn't hold when your father insulted him? Or is it the CEO who can buy and sell your father's company? Which real me do you love?" She flinched as if struck. The moral mirror he held up was flawless, and the reflection was ugly. "That's not fair," she stammered. "I always loved you. I wanted you to live up to your potential." "No," Liam corrected her gently. "You wanted me to live up to your potential for status, for a life that looked good from the outside. You didn't care if I was happy, as long as I was successful in a way you could brag about. The problem is, I was successful, immensely so. You just didn't have the eyes to see it because it wasn't loud enough for you." He picked up the Lamy 2000 pen from his desk and held it up. "You thought this was a cheap affectation. This pen has signed deals worth more than your father's entire net worth. It was right here, in your house, on your husband's desk. The truth was in front of you the entire time, but you were looking for logos and brand names, so you missed it." Tears began to stream down her face again, these ones looking more genuine. They were tears of loss, of a dawning comprehension of the sheer magnitude of what she had thrown away. "Please, Liam," she begged, her voice breaking. "Don't do this. Don't throw away 5 years. We can fix this. I can change. I'll be better. I'll support you. We can have that life, the one you built." "It's not we anymore, Chloe," he said, the words landing with devastating finality. "You dissolved the partnership. Remember? You wanted a divorce. Your father's lawyer is probably still waiting for my call. I'll be sure to have my counsel reach out to him to accept the terms." The cruelty of it was poetic. He was accepting her offer of divorce, the one she was now desperate to rescind. "You wanted a man who could provide you with a certain lifestyle," he continued, his voice softening slightly, a touch of the old sadness returning. "I understand that, but a partnership is built on something more. It's built on faith, on loyalty, on the belief in the person, not their balance sheet. When you thought we were $200,000 in debt, you didn't ask if I was okay. You didn't ask how you could help. You ran. You chose yourself. And now I'm choosing myself." He packed the last of his things into a box, a collection of his most treasured architectural books. He walked to the door, pausing beside her. "For what it's worth," he said, looking at her one last time, "I hope you find what you're looking for. I truly do. But it isn't me." He left her standing in the hallway of the house they had shared, surrounded by the life she had deemed inadequate. The door closed behind him, and this time the click was not the sound of her anger, but of his freedom. Meanwhile, at the Thorne development offices, a different kind of drama was unfolding. Marcus Thorne, after a frantic hour of calls to his bankers and lawyers, had been forced to confront the terrifying truth. Liam's assessment was not an exaggeration. It was an understatement. He was ruined. The acquisition of Thorn Development by Keystone Architectural wasn't an offer. It was a lifeline. A humiliating, infuriating lifeline, but the only one he had. At 11:47 a.m., 13 minutes before the deadline, his signed acceptance of the terms was messengered to the temporary offices Keystone had established downtown. Marcus Thorne, the self-made king, now had a boss, and his boss was the man he had once offered a pity job as a site manager. The irony was so profound, it was almost biblical. His wife, Eleanor, who had built her entire social identity on being Mrs. Marcus Thorne, was inconsolable. Her world, a delicate ecosystem of charity boards, luncheon committees, and social one-upmanship, had been shattered. She wasn't just the wife of a titan anymore, she was the wife of a subordinate. Her quiet, pitying glances at Liam had been replaced by a venomous hatred, which was, in its own way, a form of respect. She hated him because he had power over them. The consequences continued to ripple outward, reordering their world with the methodical force of a rising tide. The first casualty was Chloe's lifestyle. The unlimited credit card from her father was abruptly canceled. Her allowance, which she had never thought of as an allowance, vanished. Marcus, under the tight fiscal scrutiny of his new CEO, was forced to implement drastic austerity measures. The opulent mansion was put on the market, replaced by a far more modest townhouse in a less fashionable part of the city. The fleet of luxury cars was sold off. Chloe found herself adrift. Her identity had been inextricably linked to her father's wealth and her husband's anticipated success. Now her father was humbled, and the husband whose success had exceeded her wildest dreams was gone. Her friends, the Tiffanys of the world, began to distance themselves. Her currency in their social economy, proximity to power and money, was gone. She was no longer an asset. She was a cautionary tale. She was forced to get a real job. Her consulting position at the gallery, which had been more of a hobby, could not support her. She ended up in a high-end retail position at a luxury boutique, the very kind of store she used to shop in. There was a particular stinging humiliation in having to fetch different sizes of shoes for women who were now living the life she had thrown away. She was forced to be polite, to be helpful, to serve. She learned a humility she had never known, born not of character, but of necessity. Marcus, for his part, was forced into a daily reckoning. He reported to an executive vice president at Keystone, a sharp, efficient woman, 20 years his junior, who answered directly to Liam. He had to attend strategy meetings where his ideas were politely dissected and often discarded in favor of Keystone's more innovative, sustainable models. He was forced to execute Liam's vision, to build the magnificent structures his former son-in-law had designed. Every day was a reminder of his misjudgment. He had looked at Liam and seen a draftsman. He had failed to see the architect. He had valued hunger over integrity, and his appetite had cost him his kingdom. One day, about 6 months after the takeover, Marcus was summoned to a site meeting for the waterfront project. The foundations were being laid, a massive, complex undertaking. The lead architect was on site to oversee a critical phase. As Marcus arrived, hard hat on, he saw a small group of people clustered around a set of blueprints laid out on a temporary table. At the center of the group, pointing to a detail on the plans, was Liam. He looked different. The quiet, placid mask was gone. He was animated, authoritative, his passion for the work radiating from him. He was in his element, surrounded by people who respected his vision and talent. He was the king he had always been, but his kingdom was one of creativity and construction, not bluster and acquisition. Liam saw Marcus approaching and gave him a brief, professional nod. "Marcus, glad you could make it. We have an issue with the caisson placement on Grid C. I need your team to reassess the load-bearing capacity based on the revised geological survey." There was no malice in his tone, no gloating. It was simply a directive from a boss to a subordinate. And in that simple, professional exchange, Marcus felt the full, crushing weight of the new reality. He had to take the order. He had to go back to his team and execute the command of the man he had once openly ridiculed. He had to help build Liam's legacy on the ashes of his own. Chloe's choice had not just cost her a husband, it had cost her family its dynasty. The Thorne name, once a symbol of power in the city, was now just a subsidiary, a footnote in the story of Keystone Architectural. The choice she faced now was no longer between loyalty and ambition, but between bitter resentment and the slow, arduous path toward genuine self-respect. She had to learn to live not as a Thorne, but simply as Chloe, a woman paying her own rent, earning her own way, and haunted by the ghost of a sapphire necklace she had been unable to value until it was gone forever. A year passed. The skyline of the city began to change, shaped by the elegant, soaring lines of Liam's designs. The Sterling waterfront was rising, a testament to vision and integrity, a city within a city that promised a new way of living. Liam was no longer a secret. He was celebrated, a figure of public admiration, not just for his architectural genius, but for the quiet, principled way he conducted his business. He had absorbed Thorne development not to crush it, but to reform it, instilling a new culture of quality and sustainability. He had saved hundreds of jobs, including Marcus Thorne's. He had been given absolute power and had wielded it with grace, not vengeance. Liam himself had changed. The sadness had faded, replaced by a quiet, deep-seated contentment. He had found a new home, a penthouse apartment overlooking the waterfront project. It was a space he had designed for himself, filled with light, clean lines, and the things he truly loved: books, art, and music. The Lamy 2000 pen still sat on his desk, but it was no longer a secret totem. It was just a pen, a beautiful, functional tool he used to create. He no longer needed symbols of his hidden strength because he was no longer hiding. One crisp autumn afternoon, he was walking through a newly completed park, the first public space to open as part of the waterfront development. He saw a woman sitting on a bench, sketching in a notebook. She had her back to him, but there was something familiar about her posture. As he drew closer, he realized it was Chloe. She looked different. Her clothes were simple but elegant. Her hair was pulled back, unstyled. The garish, diamond-encrusted watch was gone. She was focused on her drawing, a look of intense concentration on her face that he had never seen before. He was about to turn and walk away, to leave her in peace, when she looked up, as if sensing his presence. Her eyes widened in surprise. A flush rose on her cheeks. She quickly closed her notebook. "Liam," she said, her voice quiet. "Chloe," he replied, giving her a small, polite smile. "I didn't mean to disturb you." "You're not," she said quickly. "I was just sketching." An awkward silence fell between them. The ghosts of their 5-year marriage stood in the space. "I heard what you did," she said finally, looking down at her hands. "For my father, you could have destroyed him. You didn't." "Destroying him would have served no purpose," Liam said simply. "He's a good builder when he's focused on the right things." "Your mother, is she doing okay?" A sad smile touched Chloe's lips. "She's adjusting. It's been hard for her, for all of us. But maybe it was necessary." She looked up at him, her eyes clear and free of the desperate calculation he had seen a year ago. "I got a promotion at work. I'm an assistant manager now. It's not CEO of Keystone, but—" She trailed off, shrugging. "It's mine. I earned it." "Congratulations, Chloe. I'm genuinely happy to hear that." And he was. He felt no triumph in her struggle, only a distant, gentle hope for her redemption. "The necklace," she said suddenly, the words rushing out. "The sapphire one. I think about it sometimes. It was the most beautiful thing you ever gave me, and I took it back." "It's in the past," Liam said softly. "I know," she said, and for the first time he heard true remorse in her voice. Not regret for what she had lost, but remorse for what she had done. "I just, I wanted you to know. I see it now, what it meant. I was so blind, Liam. I was looking at the price of everything, and I didn't understand the value of anything." It was the most honest thing she had ever said to him. It was the apology he had never asked for, but the one she needed to give. It was a small, crucial step on her own path to building something with integrity. "We all have things to learn," he said. He looked at his watch. "I have to get to a meeting. It was good to see you, Chloe." "You too, Liam." He turned and walked away, leaving her on the bench in the park that he had designed. He didn't look back. There was no dramatic reconciliation. There was no rekindling of a lost love. Their story was over. But in that brief, quiet encounter, a new chapter had begun for both of them. A chapter of quiet growth, of earned wisdom, and of lives being rebuilt on stronger, more honest foundations. Liam had learned that true partnership requires a faith that can withstand the test of perceived failure. And Chloe, in losing everything she thought she wanted, was finally beginning to discover who she was and what was truly worth having. The reversal of fortune had been dramatic and swift, but the true resolution was this: a quiet, slow, and deeply personal journey toward redemption. Not for his approval, but for her own. And in that, there was a kind of poetic justice far more satisfying than any financial ruin could ever be. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, Liam stood in his apartment, looking out at the city he was helping to shape. He thought about the central theme of his own life's design, that a person's true worth is not in what they display to the world, but in the strength and integrity of the structures they build within themselves. He had been tested, and his foundation had held. Chloe had been tested, and hers had crumbled, forcing her to clear the rubble and start again, brick by painful brick. The moral of this story isn't about the satisfaction of revenge. It's about the quiet, unshakable power of integrity. It's a reminder that the people who judge you based on superficial metrics are often blind to the true nature of your strength. Patience, strategy, and a firm belief in your own worth are more powerful than any display of dominance. In the end, arrogance builds its house on sand, while integrity builds it on solid rock. And when the storms come, and they always do, only one will remain standing. So, let me ask you all, have you ever been underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong? What do you think is the true measure of a person's worth? I'd love to read your thoughts and your own stories in the comments below. It's always incredible to see the wisdom and experience this community shares. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this. Every single click helps us bring these narratives to more people. Until next time, be true to your own design and build something that lasts.